Damien was suspicious of Nate at a cafe in LA and questioned why he was being pursued when his past didn't justify the curiosity. There was more to the story, Nate agreed. He claimed that while meeting him in person was personal, his interest in hiring him was genuine. According to Nate, he was intrigued by Damien's job switching. Nate claimed to have switched careers from medicine, but that was a lengthy tale for another occasion. But my family was what made a big difference in my life, Nate stated. He claimed that his family's affection and support helped him transition to the corporate world. Damien asked, "Where do I fit into this?" After reading his credentials, Nate claimed to have felt a connection with him. He questioned whether he needed a break and wanted to give back. According to Damien, he might be particular and would move on if he felt like he was repeating himself. Nate questioned whether Damien's uneasiness wasn't a coincidence. Nate proposed, "You understand exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it." Nate's desire to learn so much about a stranger made Damien laugh. Nate informed him that he was aware of all the details he had noticed and the ties to the Count of Monte Cristo. He surmised that Damien was employed by someone who owned Danglars properties and Monte Cristo investments, and that he frequently visited the businesses he owned to inspect them. Damien done his homework and believed Nate was intelligent. "My family needs someone they can trust." "They trust you, even if you traveled around a lot," Nate informed him. He inquired about Damien's proximity. For the sake of argument, Damien answered, "What does it matter to Nate if he was?" Working in strategic planning for the company's financial department would allow Winters to take advantage of Damien's mobility, according to Nate. When he inquired about the extent of the offer, Nate assured him that the possibilities were endless and that he would receive rewards for his success. If Nate was right about him, Damien believed it was an excellent fit for him. He questioned why Nate believed he would like to relocate to the Midwest and quit his job in Los Angeles. Nate asked whether he was interested in the possibility and added that money would encourage him. According to Damien, the encounter felt unreal and unexpected. He requested some time to consider it. Nate announced that he had to return to Genoa City for a crucial meeting. "Send him the offer," Damien said, "and he would make a decision shortly." As he shook Damien's hand to go, Nate said he was excited to talk with him further. Damien informed him, "We'll see." Nate called Amy and Audra to the cafe after Damien had left. He summarized the topics they discussed at the meeting. Amy was glad Nate had gotten in touch. Nate was uncertain as to whether Damien had fallen for the ruse. He clarified that Damien will consider the job offer and get back to him. Nate said he didn't seem to be bothered by anything. Amy informed them, "Well, that hasn't been my experience with Damien." She claimed that they could be heard arguing down the street. "Not with me." He approached his inquiries and responses methodically. Nate remembered, and he had a lot of them. If Nate believed Damien suspected him, Audra inquired. Nate cautioned, "The problem is, I don't think he's even interested in the job." When Audra questioned why he believed so, Nate clarified that it was because Damien didn't leap at the chance. "He didn't seem interested when I brought up the subject of more money." Nate informed Audra and Amy, "I felt like he was content with his current situation and wasn't really looking for a change." Damien did indicate he would give it some thought, but he wasn't really hopeful, he said. Audra recommended that Nate be honest with Damien about him, Amy, and everything else the next time they spoke. Nick joined Chance in a booth at Crimson Lights. Chance claimed that he followed Nick's instructions and attempted to obtain authorization to assist the police in their search but was denied. He revealed that after hours of searching, the divers had found no evidence of Sharon, either dead or alive, in the river or on shore. Since it at least implied that Sharon was still alive, Nick attempted to see the fact that they didn't discover her favorably. Chance believed it was feasible and reassured Nick that all of their ideas were being investigated by the police. Victor informed Michael that Ian was back in town and called him to the ranch. Victor wanted to know more, but he told him what he knew. He gave Michael the assignment to ascertain Ian's purpose for being in the city. Michael claimed that although Ian had been ordained and had a spotless prison record, there was no evidence linking him to Heather or Sharon's deaths. Had he been on the level, he wondered? Victor maintained that Ian had no positive qualities. Victor mentioned that Ian allegedly wrote to the police to say that the Newmans were to blame for anything that happened to him. Michael verified it with the police after Victor told him to find out whether it was genuine. Victor gave Michael the order to get rid of Ian, making it clear that he expected Michael to figure out a method to get Ian back in jail very away, even though Michael didn't think it would be simple. Victor claimed that because he consistently delivered, he was paid as much as he was. When Chance and Nick arrived to the ranch, Michael and Victor told Chance that they believed Ian Ward was responsible for Heather's murder and Sharon's disappearance. Chance requested them to share what they knew because that was the first time he had heard of any of it. They wanted to tell Chance more, but Nick intervened. "I'm sick of hearing it all. I'm going to take action on it." Nick stomped out after saying this defiantly. Victor clarified that Nick hoped it wouldn't be too late and that he was going to search for Sharon. Given Ian's letter to the police, Michael questioned if Nick should pursue him. Given his current state of mind, Michael didn't believe Nick gave a damn about boundaries. Victor claimed he intended to undermine Ian's confidence and that he needed to know that they wouldn't be bullied. Michael questioned, what if Nick chooses to use his fists to send that message? Ian looked for information on Sharon's crash on the news in the motel room. He pondered whether Jordan had completed the assignment as given because he knew the car must have been located by now. Jordan claimed that she fulfilled Ian's requests. Ian pondered the location of the evidence. Jordan resisted Ian's request that she recount every action she had taken with Sharon. She informed him that she had driven the vehicle into the river with Sharon's lifeless body inside, precisely where Heather had been discovered. She didn't believe Ian valued all of her efforts on his behalf. Jordan maintained that Sharon would no longer trouble them, despite Ian's concerns about the absence of news about it. Jordan claimed that Ian was acting rashly and making poor choices. Ian was concerned that the police would be at the door, but she wanted to concentrate on obtaining her own justice. Jordan informed him that Sharon had been taken care of and that she was beginning to believe Ian would never prioritize her needs. Jordan hid in the bathroom when Nick beat on the door of the motel room. Nick informed Ian as he opened the door that he would not be going until he had some answers regarding Sharon's abduction. Jordan heard from the restroom as Ian gripped his Bible. In order to slam the door, Nick grabbed Ian and threw him aside. He informed Ian that about the time he arrived on New Year's Eve, Sharon vanished. Ian said that he was unaware of her disappearance and that he was unable to be in two places at once. If something happened to poor Sharon, Ian apologized. Ian informed him, "I have the best alibi possible regarding her disappearance, you, especially since I haven't made amends to her." Nick promised Ian he would stake his life that he was responsible for Sharon's disappearance. He claimed that it made no difference that he had seen Ian that evening since every time Ian appeared, chaos broke out. Given his regrettable history, Ian could understand why he wouldn't be given the benefit of the doubt. "I suppose I have to accept that I am responsible for everything bad that occurs in Genoa City," Ian said to Nick. Nick told him bluntly that he would not put up with any more of his nonsense. Ian stated that he would pray for Sharon and expressed his honest hope that nothing negative had occurred to her. Ian was advised by Nick to hope that Sharon would not be harmed. Nick swore, "Because if it has, I'll tear you apart." Jordan listened through the bathroom door, looking concerned, while Ian glanced at him. Sharon was shackled to a pipe in the old sewage, pathetically begging for assistance. A darkness emerged, and she grew louder. Cameron remarked, "I was wondering when you'd feel the need to conjure me again." If she missed him, he inquired. He became aware that his blood streaks were still on the floor where Sharon had stabbed him in the heart. According to Cameron, the person who took her there had a terrible sense of humor. Sharon worried whether the person who took her had never returned, leaving her trapped there indefinitely. Cameron and Sharon discussed crimes, guilt, and personal development. Sharon feared that the terrible things she had done to Heather's family would never be able to be undone. Cameron never indulged in guilt because he acknowledged that it could be too much to bear. Sharon warned that she would never be exonerated of Heather's murder if she didn't make it through this ordeal. Cameron advised her to figure out how to resolve that. Cameron refused to let Sharon sleep. He made her consider who might have killed Heather and abducted her. Cameron claimed that it didn't matter who was killed as long as the person who had been targeting Sharon was brought down. He went on to say that rather than framing Daniel, they expected Sharon to end up in jail. Sharon became aware that Heather was a liability as soon as the police reopened the murder case. Whoever it was, he noted, they pulled her down to the very location where she killed him. As Sharon began to cry, Cameron said, "A place where no one is likely to find you." If someone really wanted to get rid of her, Sharon couldn't understand why they would leave her down there with food and drink. "I need to find a way out," Sharon sobbed to Cameron. She attempted to wriggle free of the cuffs as Cameron had instructed, but it was unsuccessful. Cameron chuckled and said he missed their back and forth as they quarreled. Whatever deranged part of Sharon's psyche called him back, she regretted it. Cameron warned Sharon that she was wasting her strength when she screamed for assistance. He advised her to relax and reflect. No one would ever discover her there, Sharon agreed. She was afraid her family would assume she had another breakdown and leave. "I wouldn't blame them for assuming the worst after what I've done to them." Aside from Nick, Sharon stated. Nick's constant role as her knight was mocked by Cameron. Sharon stated that although Nick thought she was innocent, she questioned whether he would be able to piece together what had happened to her. As she wailed, Cameron said, "You better hope so." At a cafe in Los Angeles, the air between Damien and Nate was thick with intrigue, suspicion, and a subtle undercurrent of mutual curiosity. Damien, a man who had mastered the art of moving from job to job with a level of precision that suggested deliberate intent, was not one to be easily impressed. He sat across from Nate, who, despite his polished demeanor, could not quite mask the hint of uncertainty in his voice as he explained why he was interested in hiring Damien. Damien, a seasoned professional with a history of bouncing from one firm to another, couldn't help but wonder why someone like Nate was showing interest in him, especially when his track record didn't exactly warrant the level of attention he was receiving. He had always been selective, choosing opportunities based on a mixture of logic and personal intuition, but never had he found himself in a situation like this before. A job offer from someone like Nate, especially considering the somewhat enigmatic nature of the conversation, felt too calculated, too personal. Nate's response was equally intriguing. He admitted that his interest in hiring Damien was more personal than professional, and that meeting him face-to-face was part of a larger plan. While Nate had indeed read Damien's resume, what truly intrigued him was the way Damien had maneuvered through his career. The endless transitions from one firm to another had caught Nate's eye, but it wasn't just the job hopping that piqued his interest. It was the idea that Damien might be the type of person who could understand the deeper connections between career moves and personal growth, someone who could fit into a bigger puzzle. Nate wasn't just offering a job, he was offering a chance for someone to belong to something greater. In the course of their conversation, Nate shared a bit about himself, his own transition from being a doctor to entering the corporate world. It wasn't just a career shift, it was a transformation that had been made possible by the support of his family. "What turned things around for me was my family," Nate explained. It was clear that his family wasn't just a source of emotional support but a driving force in his ability to make such a monumental change in his career. He understood the value of love, loyalty, and familial support, and it was this deep sense of connection that led him to seek out Damien. Damien, though intrigued, wasn't easily swayed. He wanted to know why Nate thought he would be a good fit for his company. The idea of a job in the Midwest, especially when he had established his life in Los Angeles, didn't seem appealing at first. But Nate's theory that Damien's restlessness wasn't random, that he had a method to his madness, made Damien pause. Nate saw beyond the surface. He saw a man who moved strategically, not impulsively. "You know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it," Nate observed. It wasn't an accusation, but rather an acknowledgement of Damien's self-awareness. Damien, perhaps more comfortable in the shadows of his own life, laughed at Nate's suggestion. He was a man who preferred keeping his secrets hidden, but there was something about Nate's persistence that made him reconsider. He began to understand that Nate wasn't simply offering a job, he was offering an opportunity to be part of something bigger. The conversation began to shift. Nate's offer wasn't just about business, it was about trust, loyalty, and an opportunity for personal growth. Nate's analysis of Damien's career choices wasn't just based on superficial observations. He had done his homework. He recognized the connections to the Count of Monte Cristo, a literary masterpiece that revolved around betrayal, revenge, and the pursuit of justice. Nate hypothesized that Damien worked for someone who owned both Monte Cristo investments and Danglars properties, and that his constant movement between firms was not just a career strategy but part of a larger, more complex game. The idea that Damien was part of a web of corporate intrigue intrigued Nate even further. Damien, for his part, was impressed by Nate's knowledge and insight. It wasn't every day that someone could dissect his career choices so precisely. And yet, despite the growing connection, Damien still wasn't sure about Nate's intentions. He was a man who had learned the value of trust through years of experience, and trust wasn't something he was ready to give up so easily. "I need someone my family can rely on," Nate explained. "Yes, you moved around a lot, but they trust you." It was an appeal not just to Damien's professional abilities but to his sense of responsibility. Nate's pitch for the position was clear. He needed someone who could navigate the complexities of strategic planning within the company's financial department. He didn't sugarcoat the offer. If Damien excelled, the rewards would follow. The sky was the limit. But even with this promise, Damien was still uncertain. The idea of leaving Los Angeles for the Midwest seemed like a leap, and while money was a motivating factor, there was something about the offer that didn't sit quite right with him. The conversation seemed to be veering into a territory that was more personal than professional. Still, Damien agreed to think it over. He wasn't one to make hasty decisions, especially when the stakes felt as high as they did now. Nate, sensing that Damien needed time, agreed to send him the official offer and left the ball in his court. "We'll see," Damien replied, offering a handshake before Nate left for Genoa City. Once Damien was gone, Nate summoned his colleagues, Audra and Amy, to discuss the meeting. The conversation quickly turned to Damien's reaction, or lack thereof. Amy was optimistic, seeing the potential in Damien, but Nate wasn't so sure. Damien's composed demeanor had been unsettling, as if he wasn't interested in the job at all. It wasn't the response Nate had hoped for, but it was a challenge he was ready to face. Audra suggested that Nate needed to be more direct the next time he spoke to Damien. The time for pleasantries had passed. If Damien was going to be part of their plan, it was time to reveal the truth about who Nate was and what he was offering. Nate agreed, but deep down, he wasn't convinced that Damien would bite. The restlessness that Nate had noticed in Damien seemed to be a deliberate choice, one that wasn't easily swayed by promises of wealth or stability.